Uh-oh. Uh-oh. Uh-oh, y'all. What's going on?
This confrontation outside of the Church of South Carolina pastor John Paul Miller has resulted in his arrest, already under intense scrutiny for the death of his wife Micah, and after his home was searched by the FBI, Miller now has to face charges for this separate incident. We're going to explore this latest update and everything we know about the death of 30-year-old Mica Miller. Welcome to Sidebar, presented by Law&Crime. I'm Jesse Weber. The Mica Miller story has gained widespread national attention, and this is after her husband, John Paul Miller, a pastor at Solid Rock Church in South Carolina, announced at the end of an April sermon that his wife had passed away. It was strange. It was really, really strange. He said that his wife died by her own hand in a state park in North Carolina, and since that announcement, public suspicion of Miller's alleged involvement in what happened to his wife, it is heightened. Because now we have protesters reportedly lining up outside of that church every Sunday calling for his arrest. Public supporters calling for justice for Micah accuse John Paul Miller of abusing his wife and even pushing her to take her own life, though he has denied this. And by the way, to be clear, on the day of Micah's death, he was purportedly in Charleston, hundreds of miles away. Also talking about the day of Micah's death, Mica Miller was captured on surveillance video purchasing a gun at a pawn shop before driving to Lumber River State Park, which is just over the state line in North Carolina. She called 911 telling them what she was planning to do, and even though dispatchers tried to convince her otherwise, they sadly could not talk her out of the tragic decision, and autopsy results confirmed that she died of a self-inflicted gunshot wound. Now, at the time of her death, Micah and John Paul were in the midst of a divorce, which, according to her family, she was hopeful about. Her sister had alleged that Micah had been in fear for her life, and eerily, Micah allegedly told her, quote, "If I end up with a bullet in my head, it was not by me, it was JP." Micah's family also said that she kept a journal where she allegedly wrote of being a victim of abusive, coercive control. On March 22nd, this is about a month before her death, Micah even posted this video on Facebook offering advice to anyone who may be or have been in an abusive relationship.
God hates divorce, but why? According to everybody I've asked and the scriptures that I've found, it's because it hurts people. But does abuse hurt people? How do you think God feels about that? So I want to remind you, like a bunch of people have been reminding me lately, that I'm God's bride first.
By the way, as you may know, we have been actively following the Mica Miller story for a while here on Sidebar. We've been trying to stay up to date on any new developments, and one of the reasons that we're able to continue to do that kind of work is not only because of you guys, and we can't thank you enough for your support, but also because of our sponsors and the work they do with us. And I have to call out one in particular right now, Upside. Upside's awesome. Upside is a free app, so easy to use, that helps you get cash back when you buy food, gas, and groceries. Real money, real cash back, money that appears in your Upside app that you can transfer straight into your bank account. Here, you can see I used Upside to find a gas station. I claimed an offer, pay with my credit card at the pump, followed the steps on the app. Guess what? I got cash back. And you can use Upside at all different kinds of places, restaurants, convenience stores. So to find out how much you could earn, click the link in the description to download Upside or scan the QR code on screen and use our promo code SIDEBAR and you'll get an extra 25 cents back on every gallon on your first tank of gas. Hope you can check it out. Now, despite public scrutiny, John Paul Miller has claimed that Micah struggled with mental health and that he said that he even argued with her family over her need to take medication to control her thoughts. We actually spoke with Micah's family in a previous episode of Sidebar where they addressed these mental health claims.
So before Micah married John Paul, she had no signs, no history, no indications of mental illness at all.
And why did she presumably agree to a power of attorney? Usually the person who sets up would have to agree to it and sign to it.
He had every way to control her, and he was very good at manipulating the situation.
And she thought that he would be doing the right thing. And she wanted to trust that Mr. Miller Jr. was actually doing the right thing for them until she got away from him and had more time when she spent more time with us to peel off some of those layers and realize what was going on. And then she started becoming herself again and got a job and everything else, and was doing fine and was happy-go-lucky self again, excited about the future, and which is something he did not like.
Now, to be very, very clear here, John Paul Miller has never been criminally charged in connection to Micah's death. But now, as tensions continue to rise, and as we previously reported, his house was searched by the FBI, the pastor finds himself behind bars right now. Why? Over an alleged confrontation with a protester. So according to police records, the 45-year-old was charged with third-degree assault and battery stemming from an incident outside of his church on Wednesday. And although police have not provided official details of what happened, a portion of that confrontation was captured on a witness's cell phone.
Uh-oh. Uh-oh. Uh-oh, y'all. What's going on?
And a woman can be seen chasing Miller in a parking lot, seemingly harassing him, and she is believed to be a Justice for Micah protester. That woman, identified as Sandra Karen, can be heard yelling at Miller, who turns back to confront her, and Karen told a local affiliate that Miller had squared up to her and tapped her on her hat with his phone. So what prompted this confrontation? Well, Miller was reportedly driving by the church property when he saw groups of people gathered there, prompting him to return to the scene and approach them. And after that alleged physical contact, he faces this misdemeanor charge, which by law could result in a fine and up to 30 days behind bars. He's been released on a $776 bond. He's expected back in court December 10th. But this heated exchange comes just a day after Sandra Karen said that she heard rumors the church was being emptied of its contents, possibly in relation to that FBI search of Miller's home that I mentioned about from last week. So to talk more about this, I want to bring on attorney Regina Ward, who had been representing Micah in her divorce case against John Paul. We just had her on the program the other day. Did not expect to see you again so soon, Regina, but who would have expected this development? My gosh. So he's arrested on charges of assault and battery. What's your take on this?
Well, yeah, it's assault and battery in a third degree. It's a very minor charge and is a misdemeanor. But the intriguing thing about it that I'm waiting to see unfold is that we just had a law get passed this past summer with regard to bonds. And so if and when he gets charged with the criminal indictment from this issue from the federal magistrate through the FBI's investigative efforts, a pending charge that he's under a criminal bond for at that time will be extremely relevant in whether he will receive a bond or not with regard to a charge in federal district court.
So in other words, just to clarify what you're saying, we shouldn't be surprised, and we talked about this before in a prior sidebar, we shouldn't be surprised if he is hit with charges with respect to the FBI search. And to be clear, the assault and battery is not connected to what the FBI was doing. But you're saying the fact that he has just been arrested and he has been bonded out, that could affect one way or another what may happen to him by the government, the FBI looking into him.
Yes, absolutely. If the case is not disposed of prior to him being indicted and criminally charged through the current investigation, and if that's still a pending criminal charge, even though it is a misdemeanor, it part of what the judge who's setting bond, what they have to do is evaluate a couple of things. One is, if I let this person return to society, are A, they a threat to society? And B, are they a flight risk? Well, Mr. Miller, of course, we know has access to plane and other things, so that's obviously going to be considered. And then the fact that he had a prior criminal charge, even though a misdemeanor, says that that'll come into play as well.
Do you know about any? First of all, do you know who this alleged victim is, Sandra Karen? Do you know who she is? Do you know about any of the people who are? And are there all people lined up outside the church? Do you know anything about this?
Right. I wasn't present there.
Right.
I caught a little glimpse of it last night before I, went to bed of something going down, but I don't personally to know the victim in the case. I did have an opportunity to review a video of that scene. So, the thing of it is that Mr. Miller, has more than one attorney, and he has a very good criminal attorney that's got a lot of experience and is respected in the community, and as well as I know his history. So I know that his lawyer, beyond a shadow of a doubt, and keep in mind I'm also a criminal defense attorney too, says to him, do not approach protesters. Don't respond to anyone that says anything to you about any of this. Turn and walk away would be the directions that I would give him. Why? Because of exactly this. But you have to remember who we're dealing with. It's Mr. Miller. He thinks he's untouchable. He has that sense that he can do whatever. But I tell you what, I think he did and I'm happy that the victim is okay. It was a nonviolent, interaction. But at the same time, it's like, I'm fine with him making these mistakes and stumbling around, because they're just going to stack up, and we're going to use everything we can.
But just to be clear, there are a lot of people who are lined up outside this church who are yelling at him on a daily basis or every Sunday. Do you know?
Oh, yes, I have gone over a time or two throughout the last few months looking, to see what's happening. So in the very beginning there, as usually is, you have more people there. And as time goes by, the supporters will, dwindle down a little bit. But there's been a consistent set of young women or ladies and gentlemen too, that have been very reliable in showing up there. And so part of that is, they say, no people, no church was a chant that they were doing at some point. And so all I got to say that, I remember at some point, Mr. Miller's lawyer saying things about, just let the man be, let him go, don't do anything. And I thought to myself, well, that's never going to happen, never should. And as I told him, I want to see Mr. Miller behind bars. And as far as him being, quote, harassed, is what his lawyer says was happening, is harassment. Hello, let's think about what just happened. Those dedicated supporters of Micah and the advocates against domestic violence basically closing that church.
Can we talk about that? What's going on with the church? Because I think we have these weekly domestic violence awareness protests, right, since Mica Miller's death. And apparently John Paul Miller, and correct me if I'm wrong, has filed plans to launch a new place of worship. And by Wednesday afternoon, the church's website was taken down. Its phone number was disconnected. The lettering on the building sign was stripped. But do you know what is going on there with the church? I mean, as I mentioned, there's this rumor that things are being emptied out of it. Can you provide a little bit more clarity about what's happening with this church?
Well, of course, I wouldn't have any particularly insider information on that, although I'd like to. But what I do know about it, and I spoke to a extremely reliable source that would know, is that yes, the church is being emptied out and closed down, for lack of a better word. It's the classic, preacher situation that's gone rogue, and we're running him out of town. The same thing happened to his father when he was a preacher. He got ran out of town too. So it's a situation where he can't be here. He can't. It's my understanding that it was announced at the last service that he had, that was the last one, that everyone would have to find another church. Now, as far as what he's actually doing with regard to, starting another church or so forth, well, I don't know if it's going to be him particularly, but here, let's think about this. when people are going to church there and they're tithing money, giving their money, their earnings to the church for a charitable purpose, or they may even write a name on it for some mission, or they may write something on it for the new, school building fund or something. When people give that money for that particular reason, that's what that money has to be used for. The church, Solid Rock Church, is a multi-million-dollar church. Okay, it has a lot of money and it has a lot of property, has a lot of things in value, and that money and that property does not belong to Mr. Miller. It belongs to the people, or as Micah would say, it's God's money, and it is illegal. It is illegal to shut down a church, take the money, and it not go back to where it was intended to be. So he dang well better be setting up another church somewhere else.
Talk to me about, last time you were on, we were talking about the FBI search at his home, which again, right now remains kind of a mystery as to what they're looking for, what exactly potential charges could look like. Is there anything more you can share with us? Last time you spoke to us, you said this might not just be about Micah, this might be about several other people. We're talking about the church now. Is there anything else you can share with us about what we should be expecting, or maybe when we could expect more information about what the FBI is looking into?
Yeah, a lot of people keep asking me, those questions. So back in June, I was served with a grand jury from the United States District Court, asking for all of my materials, my file documents, and everything that I had in my possession that was related to Micah. As far as page 2 of that subpoena, well, first of all, they subpoenaed me to come down to Florence to testify before the grand jury. And they gave me an option to produce the documents and those types of things and directly to the assigned one of the assigned special FBI agents. So attached to that subpoena is a list of specific things that they wanted me to supply them with, and in that list, it specified particular things or events. I would say types of crimes that it might be related to, which obviously I cannot disclose, period, sure. Because whenever you're investigating someone, for a crime, you give them a heads up what you're coming after, then there's going to have the opportunity to dispose of certain evidence. So we certainly don't want to jeopardize any sort of investigation with regard to that. As to what's going to happen next, well, that's pretty straightforward. It's going to take a little while for the FBI to get through, everything that they took out of there. But the next step is going to be that indictment, that arrest. That's what's going to happen next. Is it going to happen this month? Probably not. Next month? Probably not. Do I know specifically what day it's going to happen? No, I don't even think the FBI does now. They have to stack up enough evidence to go back to the magistrate and say, oh, thank you so much for that search warrant. Now we would like to get an arrest warrant. So they put all of that together. That's what's happening now.
And look, I imagine if you're John Paul Miller or you're his attorney, what happened just now with him being arrested is the last thing that he needs or wants. And it's interesting because thinking about this heated confrontation, this is apparently not the first time that Miller has found himself on the accused end of violence or violent allegations, because before his marriage to Micah, let everybody know, Miller was married to a woman named Alyssa Williams, with whom he shares children with. And Williams, as our understanding, filed an emergency custody complaint against him, citing imminent danger to their 2 minor children. And Williams, who was married to John Paul Miller for, I believe, 16 years prior to their divorce in 2015, actually alleged that he was the one who suffered from mental health issues. And she said in this legal document, this filing, that John Paul has exhibited increasingly unstable behaviors. And she further alleged that his mental health has increasingly deteriorated, and he has demonstrated behavior patterns that are erratic and irrational. And Miller married Micah after his divorce from Williams, and Williams goes on to say in her affidavit that the marriage between the two began to deteriorate in 2021. She even described bizarre sermons that Miller allegedly gave to the congregation about Micah with their children present. And one of the documents says that John Paul would preach sermons on the Sundays our children were with him and present in the congregation, disparaging Micah and indicating she had mental health issues and eventually putting her in a mental health hospital. And when Micah returned from this stay at this facility, Williams described what was an increasingly unpredictable situation in which Miller would call Micah crazy one day and then say she was fine the next day. So Regina, really interesting back and forth. You were representing Micah when she was filing for divorce. What can you tell us about these claims from John Paul Miller's ex-wife?
Yes. What was interesting too is his ex-wife actually initially, I think, had retained my services, and I had an associate attorney with me at that time that took that I signed the case to. So the things that she was complaining about were spot on. And yes, after everything unfolded in the very beginning, she did get to file an emergency action to suspend his visitation rights with with his children, and got that in a blink of an eye. As far as Mr. Miller, spiraling out of control, the man has never been in control. Period. It's one of those things. If you ever have, for me as an attorney, especially in domestic arena, having the opportunity to do depositions and things like that. One of my favorite cases always is to have a narcissist on the other side, because they're so, smug and think that they can get away with everything. And they also spin their stories, and most people that are around them will buy the stories because they don't either, have a minute to think about it. But he's doing classic stuff, classic things, classic behavior, in that he thinks he's an untouchable. He can do whatever he wants to, that if he keeps saying that it's this way and this way and this way, that eventually everybody will go, oh, goodness, well, it must be that way because he said it 9,282 times. But he is not, in my opinion, is not really getting what's happening. If I were his defense attorney, there'll be a whole lot of different going on over there. So I'm thinking at this point, lawyers, what we have to do is if we got the winning case, that's easy enough, right? If you don't have the winning case, then the lawyer's duty at that point is to try to mitigate that circumstance. For instance, if you have someone who is facing jail and you can't go around that, then the win is to get them the least amount of time. So with the things that he's been doing, there is no way that he has not been instructed to not do those things. Like point blank, if a protester approaches you, you turn around and you go. You don't talk. You don't respond. You don't say anything. I don't care what they say. I don't care what they call your mama. Don't respond. Okay, just none.
Sometimes easier said than done.
For him, nothing good is going to come out of it. He's not going to change anything. The protesters are not going away. And I don't necessarily like to call them protesters per se, but they are supporters. They are domestic abuse victim supporters. And they are out there fighting, and they are rallying. And not only are they bringing attention to what Mr. Miller has been doing, they are bringing attention to what other people are doing as well. And it's critical for them to keep talking and keep bringing that forefront. Now, I don't agree with running after him. I'll just be honest about that.
Right.
Okay. Stay on your side lane, say whatever you want to, but you're also risking yourself by approaching him. People like him are unpredictable. Okay. So stay away, do the protests, walk with your signs. Do not be an abusive person. You can't go out there and speak against violence and abuse while you're using those tactics yourself. So please, I'm asking those who are supporters to think about that. Be nonviolent and continue to do the work you're doing, because guess what? It's working. But we got a lot more to do.
Regina, I want to go to this. I want to close this up by going back to Micah for a second and talking about what her state of mind might have been. Because, and correct me if I have the timeline wrong, but apparently she files for divorce. and was it, just 2 days later that she died? What do you think was going on? What do you think was happening with her? Because that's really the central issue. You know, there are those who believe that John Paul Miller was involved in her death. There are those who say he pushed her to do that or drove her to it, and people will equate that with the same thing. And again, to be clear, he hasn't been charged with her death, and he was, purportedly in a different area. But again, the idea of what was going on with Micah. What can you tell us? What do you think her state of mind was after she files for divorce and then she dies?
Yes, so this was the second time that Micah had filed. The first time was actually for divorce on the grounds of adultery and so forth. So the second time when I filed for her, I wanted to file for divorce on adultery, physical cruelty, and a myriad of other things. Micah did not want to pursue that because she just didn't want the fight of it. She just wanted to separate their property and move on, and him to just leave her alone. For her, there was this feeling of liberation, okay? And I think I've talked about this before. I will never forget it as long as I live. It was one of the most sweetest things I think I've ever witnessed in my life. And that was Micah standing in my conference room in my office and telling me, and I could feel this sense in her body of this relief that she had finally reconciled that it is okay to leave this man, okay, and to walk away from this marriage, and that she was going to pursue her dream with this mission. That just brightened her. It just illuminated the entire building whenever she would talk about this. So was she sad about going through a divorce? Well, yes, it's called situational depression. Every person, that's normal goes through that. But on the flip side, she was happy. She was ready to move on. She was ready to start her new life. She was ready to put John Paul Miller behind her and leave him back there.
So what do you think happened?
I think that he did what he had already done so many times for so many years, and that is we filed for separation, okay? I had him served by my process server on that Thursday. Now, I had filed in advance of that Thursday, but we were getting things together. So the process server served him on Thursday, and then, of course, on that Saturday is when Micah's untimely passing happened. So I feel very sure, and of course, it's speculation. I don't have inside this. I don't have his cell phone, and I surely don't have Micah's cell phone yet. And I'm not going to get it, y'all. You know why I'm not going to get it? Because the order says that when the legal authorities are finished with it, they'll return it to me. Well, Robeson County had it. Guess who they had to give it to? The FBI. They're not going to give it back to me because they're going to use it as evidence in a trial. So as to what I think happened, if the prediction goes with if history repeats itself, he called her incessantly. He texted her incessantly. He probably made her meet him somewhere to discuss it because he had done that. Anything that he could do to shove and push her in any kind of way, make her feel guilty for getting a divorce, trying to convince her that it's all going to be okay if she just comes home. Or, there's always a concern of hers. He weaponized her beliefs and her religion and her wonderful faith. He weaponized that against her. I would not be surprised that there's evidence that proves every bit of that. That's just me guessing.
That's just you guessing. Regina Ward, thank you so much for coming on. Appreciate you taking the time. I mean, again, I don't know when I'm going to see you next, but it's great seeing you. I just didn't know I was going to be seeing you so soon. So we'll see what happens next in this saga. Really appreciate you taking the time, and good to see you. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you. I appreciate your time.
All right, everybody, that's all we have for you right now here on Sidebar. Thank you so much for joining us. And as always, please subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Jesse Weber. I'll speak to you next time.